Right, welcome everybody to our second panel today, which is on gender and the role of the body in science fiction. At least that's the title I picked for it, to find some common strands between the talks. And our first talk on this panel is Iuliia Ibragimova, is speaking on countering the weapon fetishism, call for nonviolence, and popular culture of the Cold War period, as represented by Captain America Volume 1 and Anne McCaffrey's The Ship Who Sang. So Iuliia, the floor is yours. And
Thank you.
I will make sure actually that everybody can share their screen if they need to. Yes, it's set now. Okay.
Okay, so now I can share the screen, yes? Okay. Great. Hello, everybody. First of all, I would like to thank organizers for the great work they've done for organizing it all. So, and now I hope that you can see my screen. Okay. Yeah. Hello everyone again. Today I'm going to talk about call for nonviolence in the Cold War popular culture as exemplified by Captain America comics and Anne McCaffrey's The Ship Who Sang. So why talk now about the Cold War period? In 2010s, there are so many reminiscences in the news of the Cold War period, with several countries either testing nuclear weapons or openly like North Korea, or suspected of it like Iran, with major international players brandishing their military successes. It all brings back the reminiscence of Cold War, with the nuclear weapon testing, implementation, and how it changed the relations between humanity and scientific progress, threatening the annihilation of the human race. I'm going to focus on two popular cultural works, Anne McCaffrey's The Ship Who Sang and Captain America comics. The Ship Who Sang was published as a fix-up novel in 1969, but the first story appeared in 1961, so it embraces a whole decade of creative process, touching upon various relevant social issues, including international politics and the attitude to war. The titular character of Captain America appeared in 1941 and was quite popular in the Second World War. However, in the 1950s, the popularity dwindled. There were only a couple of issues, but he was reintroduced in the Tales of Suspense and Adventures in the 1960s, and even in 1969 he had his own comic series. The 1960s is important as a political environment for these works because in terms of international relations, it's the years of the Vietnam War, the Cuban Missile Crisis, unprecedented arms race, also space race with a lot of achievements like first human flight into space and the moon landing, and increasingly tense relations between the US and the USSR, the two major superpowers, which of course led to a very specific cultural context. With all this militarism in the political context, of course, there was a lot of weapon fetishizing images, the nukes and the bombs, also a lot of apocalyptic scenarios that employed the developments in technology. Of course, in contrast to popular culture, there was a countercultural response in terms of in the form of peace protests, and also very bright on the music stage, including such figures as Bob Dylan. So in this decade, Anne McCaffrey started writing her stories, which later were published as The Ship Who Sang. The protagonist of The Ship Who Sang, Helva, is a cyborg woman who was born into a disabled body and had to be integrated into a spaceship. Being an employee of a medical section of a future government-like organization, she's often involved into life-saving missions. She saves colonies from the burning sun, brings fetuses to a planet made infertile by radiation flare, etc., etc. What is interesting about the ship Busan is that the future portrayed there doesn't have any weapons. Well, it does have, but if the weapon is used, it's going to be by some antagonist or a villain purely. Helva and her partners, to contrast it, use artistic means and creative approach to fight the baddies. Helva has a hobby, she sings, but this singing voice transforms from a means of expression into something that can be used as a weapon. So Captain America is a feeble young man who tries to get enrolled into the army, and he's also an art student. And after he's injected with the super soldier serum, his physique transforms radically and he becomes mighty and can fight the Nazis. And here you can see the first issue of Captain America, which is quite telling. In the 1940s, he was very much connected with the governmental national hero image, while later in the 1960s, his reintroduction did more to question the governmental agenda on war and patriotism, which is also reflected in the way he becomes a vigilante later on in the 90s, for example, when he is one of the nomad superhero identity, which doesn't have, obviously, any kind of association with the government. What's more, Captain America does not have this wonderful weapon that will fight, with which he fights his enemies. His attribute is a shield, which is more to protect than to attack somebody. So these two protagonists share very important features. First of all, they both have bodies that are perceived by their respective societies as disabled, which influences their worldview, though representations in both comics and the novel have been criticized. They are both post-human entities. Their resulting bodies is the product of technology and introduction of technology into the organic human body. They both share a connection to art. Steve Rogers draws and Helva sings, and in their respective narratives, they pretty much have messianic functions. So what is more important for me in these two works is that they both have this message of peace. They are not very open about it. They are still a part of popular culture. But with Captain America, with this idea of protection, not fighting, and plot lines of resistance, like eventually in Civil War when he decides to surrender, not to be a part of the killing. Helva refers many times to the atomic age with singers and music, and uses her singing in a Dylanist manner to fight the death cult. And she lives in this world of international peace and cooperation, which sends a very important message of condoning peace and challenging mainstream that brandished weapons in the 1960s. Thank you.
Thank you. And we're gonna jump over to our second talk today by Joseph Jenner on the gendered politics of the Anthropocene, the body and look of the female astronaut. Over to you.
Great, thank you so much, Sabrina. It's the first time I've had a chance to join one of these sessions, so it's really lovely to meet you all for the first time. And because of this, the first time I've had a chance to join, I might be a bit clunky and a bit slow as I get used to the format, so bear with me. I'm just going to share my slides. Okay, fantastic. Oh, okay, that's fine. I can play them like that. Okay, fantastic. I might just keep it like this. Okay, great. So what I'm going to share with you today is based on excerpts from an article I had published a couple of years ago. And I wanted to share this within the context of this conference because I've recently finished my PhD and kind of been working full time elsewhere. So I'm a bit out of the loop with academia and research. So I was really keen to kind of have this conversation with all of you because I think the body and gender is something that I want to continue my research with, and I'd really love to hear your feedback about this piece of work that, you know, now is a couple of years old. But I think as it is about female astronauts and we're seeing films continuing to come out about female astronauts, it's definitely still kind of research that's ongoing. What I kind of want to talk about and what this article is interested in is the relationship. So I'm just going to look at the time so I don't go over too much. Is the relationship between female astronauts basically the reason I wrote this article was I just kept watching films and TV with female astronauts, and I was thinking, why is there this obsession with them being mothers or failed mothers or having monstrous spawn, giving birth to aliens and this kind of thing. I was really fascinated by that, and I kind of was researching the Anthropocene at the time, and I kind of saw a link between the two things. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to kind of talk through an excerpt from the scriptures as a close analysis of two films that I want to focus on. So Interstellar, Christopher Nolan's film from 2014, and Gravity, Alfonso Cuarón's film from 2013. And maybe if I have a bit of time, the Cloverfield Paradox as well. So to begin. So Interstellar, there's a scene in which they've just blasted off from Earth, and Anne Hathaway's character Brand is looking back at Earth, and she's talking with her male compatriots on board the ship, and she says, "Oh wow." She whispers as she floats through the spaceship Endurance. Her exclamation overlaps the cut from the previous shot of a blue and white Earth seen through the ship's window that fills most of the screen, a thick bar intersecting the frame and partially obstructing the view. Shortly after that, as the crew begin their course towards Saturn, a view of the same window shows a now rotating Earth. As with the first shot, Brand's breath registers her body behind the camera and tethers this view of the Earth from space to her perspective. Interstellar, like many space exploration films of recent years, posits a not too distant future in which Earth's resources have become depleted and the atmosphere has become increasingly adverse to human life. Brand is one of a crew of 4 astronauts, all men besides her, who are seeking life-bearing planets in another galaxy to relocate to and save the humans that they've left behind. Despite the radiant spectacle witnessed by Brand, the luminescence of the planet below and the curved bend of light that measures out its circumference, and these glorious spectacles of Earth are kind of par for the course in any kind of space exploration sci-fi film, obviously. But Earth in this case is associated with decay and death in this film. So Interstellar opens with images and testimony of the 1930s American Dust Bowl, for those of you who haven't seen it, which is used as a kind of historical metaphor for the decline of Earth's ability to sustain life. So Brand's response to viewing the Earth from space is one of awe, but it's also loaded with recognition of the interconnected fate of humanity with an alien planet. And it's obviously significant that this POV shot, this first-person shot, is associated with her perception, and it's with her that we share these kind of embodied breathing point of view shots. So what I want to do now is I want to switch. So we've had this kind of transition from this reverse shot of a view of the Earth, and then a cut back to the female astronaut played by Anne Hathaway. But we're now thinking about what happens when Earth and the astronaut are held in the same screen together. How do they register differently? Okay. So another significant point of view shot of a female astronaut looking back at Earth is in this film, Alfonso Cuarón's 2013 Gravity. Unlike Interstellar, Gravity is set in the kind of historical present and opens with the protagonist, mission specialist Ryan Stone, who, as you can see, is played by Sandra Bullock, installing a new module on the Hubble telescope. After the destruction of the telescope by debris hurtling around the planet, Stone is tethered to Matt Kowalski, who's played by George Clooney, another very heroic kind of male astronaut, by a cable as they make their way across the expanse of space to the International Space Station. So early in the film, Stone tells Kowalski about the loss of her daughter in a freak accident in the school playground. Initially, as Stone tells her story, the Earth is reflected in Stone's visor or hangs suspended to the left, while Stone's face occupies the right of the frame, as you can see in the screen grab that I've taken here. Eventually, the perennially floating camera drifts to occupy Stone's point of view as she finishes her story and looks down on an expanse of land and sea at daybreak on a dark blue and brown Earth. The loss of her daughter is visually mapped onto Earth. Later in the film, Stone's description of her daughter is that of having brown hair and blue eyes, and it's obviously matched with the colour of Earth. So Gravity is not explicitly concerned with the anxieties around the depletion of natural resources and an unsustainable Earth in the way that Interstellar is, but nonetheless, there is an association between Earth and death, a link between maternal loss and a planet that finds it increasingly difficult to sustain life. And so, getting onto my argument, so I'm just keeping on the time. So Interstellar and Gravity configure point of view shots to anchor the viewer to a female embodied impression of the Earth from space. So these point of view shots of female astronauts, I think, suggest a political reconfiguration or thinking through of agency in this kind of epoch that that we're now calling the Anthropocene. It's obviously a kind of a buzzword that comes up a lot in conferences. So Richard Grusin and Donna Haraway, so two key thinkers on the Anthropocene, they talk about how Anthropocene discourse, so the sense that we're now living through a period on Earth that's defined by human activity through industrial, migrational kind of activities, that this kind of discourse is characterized by male views that prop up techno-normative or masculinist solutions to the environmental crisis. And views of Earth of space that we see here experienced by these two female astronauts, Brand and Stone, provide an understanding of interconnectivity that generates an alternative paradigm shift towards seeing human and Earth as interrelated, rather than this kind of this sense of humans mastering Earth and life on it. So I'm kind of thinking about these films in relation to these kind of feminist revisions of Anthropocene discourse. But what's also clear, it's not just about this POV, this point of view of the female protagonist. It's clearly, there's a kind of, these anxieties about the end of life on Earth are projected onto kind of maternal interests. So the failure of procreation, so Stone's loss of her daughter, is projected onto anxieties about the Earth's increasing inability to sustain life. And you know, there are countless examples of this. So by images of failed motherhood, I mean contemporary sci-fi film and television is populated by female astronauts who are grieving a lost or dying child, are infertile, give birth to alien or monstrous offspring. And this kind of, and you know, I think there are countless examples of this. We can look at, there's an indie film, One Under the Sun, The Cloverfield Paradox, again, where Gugu Mbatha Raw's character has lost her children, as it turns out later in the film. There's the TV series The 100 Extant with Halle Berry that came out a few years ago, The Space Between Us, and there are kind of contemporary examples from the cinema over the last couple of years. And I think so. Just to kind of round up. So Rebecca Sheldon published a book in 2016 called The Child to Come, where she talks about how you get narratives of sterility in post-apocalypse in kind of literature, television, and film, which often is used to kind of counteract kind of fears about the end of the world, and how in things like The Handmaid's Tale, so June from The Handmaid's Tale or Key from Children of Men, they're kind of, to quote, sequestered into procreative labour roles in response to the threat of sterility. And I think very much we can see that at work in the way that female astronauts are treated on screen. So there's a tension then between female astronauts as offering a view of Earth from space that's different to their male counterparts in this masculinist Anthropocene, but also you get these anxieties around procreation that are a kind of trigger point for the Anthropocene that are also mapped onto their bodies. And that's me done. Thanks so much.
Thank you. And our third talk is Cristina Algaba, who's talking about empowering the simulacrum, changing roles and power relationships in the dystopian theme park Westworld. Thank you.
Yes, good evening. Firstly, I would like to thank Sabrina and all the organizers to make this possible to be here this evening with you, sharing my work. As we have haven't much time, I will jump to my presentation. Let's see. Okay. Can you see it?
Yes.
Okay, because I can't. Let's see. Well, firstly, I'm Cristina Algaba. I'm a PhD student at the University of Sevilla. I'm currently writing my dissertation about remake television and science fiction. Especially, I focus on Westworld as a narrative universe. And I'm going to share a brief part of my work. This one entitled Empowering the Simulacrum, Changing Roles and Power Relationships in the Dystopian Theme Park Westworld, focus especially in one part of this Westworld narrative universe. I'm sure that most of you know Westworld, maybe because its previous films or TV series, it arrives at the audiovisual world under the title of Westworld in 1973 with a plot written by Michael Crichton that we all know, but other novels and ideas like Jurassic Park that also focus on a theme park, a particular theme park. But today I will focus on Westworld, the reimagined version of HBO channel. As a starting point, just to share brief ideas that make to focus the presentation on this topic. Firstly, I approach Westworld in the first 2 seasons of the TV series because the 3rd season is developed outside the theme park. But during the first 2 seasons, we saw that Westworld as a theme park, the landscape was chosen was the Western. That is a very popular genre within the cinema and television industry. And it also incarnates, embodies the old and new America. This is made by the TV series, combining the different iconographies, thematics of the 2 genres, Western and science fiction. All this is remixed with some postmodernism features like simulacrum, nostalgia, parody that reinforce the critical discourse expressed in the TV series around capitalism. So, as a theme park, Westworld embodies the neoliberal dream. This is illustrated during the first 2 seasons in different parts of the passages of the series, and of course, the main slogan of the theme park, owned by Delos Incorporated, a big company located in United States, in a dystopian United States, that we don't know much about the government, how it's organized, or any other political arrangements that are made in that location, because we don't know until the 3rd season. The main slogan is Life Without Limits, and it's focused, as we can imagine, to the clients, the visitors and customers that are taken as reference to design the park. This is the bright side of Westworld. If we are humans, and a particular human, not women and men, is the white man that supports conservative values, that supports the patriarchy. And we can see this in the first passage of the first episode, when the two visitors, the main characters, are received by a female android that offers him to take all that he wants from the park, including her. So visitors can have free sex because they have previously paid the passage to enter the theme park, and this allows them to do whatever they want. They can choose between the white hat and the black hat, depending on if they want to do good or bad things, to be the hero or the villain or the antagonist in the theme park. And once they arrive, they can find what they call in Delos the host that wait for the guest according to the control and power relationships established by the staff and by Delos investors in order to get the most economically from the park and to make their customers very happy once that they have visited the theme park. There, through some visitors, like the man in black or William, we can see how they can rape, they can kill, they can consume prostitutes, they can do whatever they want without limits. But on the contrary, for the androids, for the hosts, we can see that Westworld is for them a prison ruled by Delos company interests, and that are at the service of the human and the potential clients of their parks. So this leads us to the dark side of Westworld. We can see that in the main control building, there is a part called the fridge that we can see in the main photo of the slide, where all the androids that stop working or that they start presenting some misfunction, they are retired from the park and live in this kind of what is called fridge, no, to that storage from them. We also can see that every night all the androids memories are erased in order to make them the next day be happy, be smile. I don't remember anything that humans do to them. So in this sense, we can see Westworld as the city of Leonia. If we think in Invisible Cities, the novel written by Italo Calvino, where Italo Calvino illustrates a city, Leonia, in which every night and daily, the citizens throw all the garbage, all the things, because they want tomorrow a new thing, something that is new and without any path of memory. So in Westworld, we can see that, and the garbage men would be the staff that we can see in some of these photographs that are cleaning all the dark things, not moral things that humans have done in the park the night before. In this context, we can see that the resistance soon arrive at the park. This is led by the creators of the theme park idea that throughout the years have seen how the original idea has been sold to the advantage of neoliberalism values and interests. So we can see how Westworld converts or turns into from Westworld, or we can see if we think in Brody Yard's states posts about Disneyland. So from Westworld, ideal place to enjoy, find yourself and do whatever you want, moral or immoral, to turn in Westmaland, what I have called Westmaland, that referring to Dismaland, to the Bansky project, in which he criticized this capitalism context and leisure places. So I would like for the discussion just to share this idea and maybe see your opinion. As for example, Sabrina, I know that she's an expert of theme park. So I think I can leave it here because it was very difficult to summarize all what I had to say about Westworld in these first 5 minutes. So thank you.
Thank you. So we can go to discussion. So please, everybody is here. If you have any questions, type it into the chat. I will. Cristina, can you stop sharing your screen and I can?
Yes, sorry.
There we go.
Okay.
So yeah, all panelists can turn their cameras back on, obviously. So thanks again for your talks. I was wondering if there's anything, basically I'm going to give you the floor first. If you had any questions for each other, if you feel like you have any maybe common strands you want to touch upon, I'm just going to give you the opportunity to do this first.
Well, I have a question for Joseph. Well, all your presentations were very interesting. Thank you to Iuliia and Joseph for sharing them. Joseph, I started watching at Netflix a new TV series that is about astronauts. So it's like a new representation of the astronaut. I don't know if you are now once after Interstellar, that no, Gravity, sorry, that we know that it make before and after around the female astronaut as main character. What have you appreciate after this film? Have it makes innovations, or have it encouraged new products for TV fiction or films?
Sorry, yeah, thank you for the question. So sorry, just so I understand, so are you asking whether Gravity itself offers a new kind of representation of the female astronaut?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think no. I think there's something. I think there's something that just really. I see Gravity as an example, as lots of other. As an example of a kind of trend in, I don't know what it is when screenwriters write about female astronauts, but it's always, there's this sense of like women yearning about their like lost maternal function, whether it's like, so in Gravity, it's obviously, you know, Sandra Bullock's daughter dies when she's very young. In like the TV series The 100, there's like in series 1, like the Dr. Paige Turco, like her daughter goes to Earth, so she's looking at Earth because literally her daughter is on it. There's like Prometheus, where, you know, she gives birth to this like kind of alien creature. There's like another film called One Under the Sun, where the female astronaut's daughter has like is dying of cancer. So there's just like, I kind of just see Gravity as, there's something about Alfonso Cuarón as a director where he's incredibly nostalgic. And so he really like seems to celebrate like this quite traditional version of motherhood and maternity, like Children of Men, with the figure of Key, where she is the last woman on Earth who can have a baby. There's something about Cuarón where I think he's really traditional in terms of the way that he represents women on screen, because he's a very nostalgic filmmaker. But I think just in terms of offering something new or progressive or a different way of like imagining the female astronaut, I don't think he does that at all in Gravity. So the short answer is no. Sorry,
Okay.
I hope that
Thank
answer
you.
was good enough. I hope that answered your question.
Yes, I see some parallelism with the representation of female androids or genoids, because in Westworld, two of the main androids, Dolores and Maeve empower herself, but she's connected with a supposed daughter, a memory of a daughter. So the motherhood in her, in the kind of actions that he does during all the TV series, determines her path, no? So it's a empowered female character, but linked and connected with the motherhood issue. And now I'm watching Race, the last Ridley Scott TV series, Raised by Wolves. I don't know if you have seen it. There is an android also, and the thematic of motherhood is also very important, no? To describe this character.
Yeah, no, thank you very much.
I also wanted to, like, Joseph has already touched about it, about this nostalgic female image in Gravity. And I was thinking when I was watching Gravity, the spoiler alert, the ending of the film, Sandra Bullock returns to the Earth. She returns while the masculine figure goes into space. And she, like, probably this can even be connected with the idea of Anthropocene, of the, like, promise of rebirth in this aspect.
Totally. I totally see that as well. So I feel like I'm talking a lot, so I'll say one thing and then shut up. But yeah, no, totally. I think because there's something as well, I kind of think about that in relation to Interstellar as well. So again, spoiler alert, because we were talking about endings, but like Interstellar ends with Matthew McConaughey, who's like your archetypal masculine astronaut, flying to, it's like a little moon off Jupiter where like humanity's moved to, and it's a really technologically advanced society. So you have male astronaut, technically advanced society, female astronaut, gravity. She returns to Earth and you see her crawling out of the lake and she's covered in mud and silt. It's literally this return back to nature, back to like this organic world. So there is like a real alternative to a masculine kind of fetishistic technological Anthropocene that you get in Interstellar versus how it kind of ends out at the end of Gravity. Yeah, so totally agree. Yeah, so I could also see, I think there's a question in the chat for Iuliia as well, so I didn't want that to get left out.
I'm gonna jump to that as well. So for Iuliia, from another Iuliia, so in both your examples, the protagonists are cast as somehow disabled and through some kind of intervention receive new post-human bodies that then make them more than rather than less than. I was struck by how, while standing for pacifism, Captain America becomes an image of hypermasculinity. Is that, would you say, a resignification of disability or rather an erasure of it?
A very interesting question. Actually, when I was doing this like presentation and this research for my side project, I was thinking about the multiverse and how Captain America is a very diverse character, a very layered character. So we have this terrible superhuman body, which becomes even associated with eugenic kind of trance of the superhuman body. And we have also these narratives of plot lines of resistance that are also basically in his character, and how he combines all of them. Though, like, stating that he's 100% pacifistic character, I wouldn't say that, because of the multiverse and him functioning in a variety of narratives, in a variety of actually different plots, where he can kick some ass. Sorry for this
And
relation.
a second one for you, actually. From your talk, it sounded like the protagonists in McCaffrey's novel, while retaining some characteristically female attributes such as creativity or singing, seems to lose a lot more of her former gender connotations in losing her actual body, in contrast to Captain America. Is that what you say? Because women are culturally much more defined by their bodies. And she said she was thinking about Enlecki's Ancillary Justice trilogy, for instance.
Yes, thank you for this question. It's just like makes me bloom, so I hope that I'm not just taking all the time speaking about it. Actually, yes, with Helga, it is very interesting that her gender is completely performative because her body is truncated. It's like a diminutive version of a human body. And like her voice can be either masculine or feminine. She can sing different parties. So in her case, gender is purely performance, and a very 1960s performance, like all this femininity, all this caring about your partner and renovating your, so to say, interior and exterior. While in Captain America, it is 100% biological masculinity rooted in the body and presented very much within this heterosexual paradigm, very even intrusive. So I think it very much depends on the gender and the relation between the cyborg and the gender, as in gendered, cyborgs gendered as masculine are always a transhumanist version of the paradigm, while with McCaffrey and the Ship Hussein, we can see this kind of idea of going beyond gender as a Harawaiian cyborg, not as a transhumanist cyborg, but like traces of post-humanism. And yes, with Ancillary Justice, it works really well, especially how the human body is brought to the periphery and the whole entity becomes non-gendered altogether. I hope that I answered your question. Thank you.
Thank you. We have another one for Joseph, actually, because Ashimi says the presentation was very interesting, and she was wondering if we can read into the character of Amy Adams in Arrival, not as an astronaut, but as a, the family trauma tragedy narrative, and the connection with outer space and alien life is linking it to the female Anthropocene in some way.
I mean, yeah, it's a really good question. I don't know. I mean, I think the first thing I'd want to say is one thing I'm not really sure about myself is the difference between like a feminist Anthropocene and a female Anthropocene. Like, because feminist suggests it's like a critique of the Anthropocene and how it's developed through, like, what Haraway and Grusin, the kind of two thinkers that I described in my talk, as, is a very kind of, it's a very fetishistic, techno-oriented way of like tackling like the climate crisis. And because I think this is basically something I'm really aware of through these like images of female astronauts. So including Amy Adams is just because, like, if you have female astronauts and they offer an alternative to male astronauts, both in terms of, like, obviously I was doing close analysis, both in terms of representation, but also what they signify. That's like, but there's also this like linking back to like their body and like with the maternal, like this very like heteronormative maternal function, is that, like, I think with like if we see like a feminist Anthropocene, then that's a critique. If we say a female Anthropocene, then that suggests there's like a normative version of what we're describing as like womanhood, or like the female body here, right? So I think like so that's like a slightly obtuse response. I think like for Arrival itself, yeah, it's all about, it's like, and the kind of cyclical, like the cyclical narrative, or the narrative becomes cyclical, and you get this sense of return, which actually links to what Iuliia was saying when we had that little chat about the end of Gravity, and then it's all about a kind of return to Earth. And you actually get that in Arrival, but rather than a physical return back to matter, you get a narrative return back to the beginning of the film. there is something about circles and women, and that you get like in both, that you get with female astronauts. And I think, yeah, and I think that is suggesting that there is a kind of like feminist or female Anthropocene like narrative and aesthetic that you get in these films. So yeah, Ashumi, I hope that responded to your question. Thank you.
Actually, just a quick follow-up to that from me. Have you seen Star Trek Discovery?
Sorry, there's so many Star Treks. Which one's that?
Well, then you probably haven't. The one Michael Burnham, like it was the most recent one until Picard came along. So from like 2017. Okay, just because the protagonist there she's not an astronaut. I mean, it's just Star Trek, but like one of the first times you see her, she has kind of a spacesuit like an astronaut, and like the second season brings back her mother, and that has the same kind of spacesuit, and it's all about time travel, but it's all about mothers and maternal, connection.
Was it? Sorry.
Yeah, Star Trek Discovery first and second, and then specifically second season. There's all this motherhood and like women in spacesuits in a way that might come into this if you ever do any more work. I had a question for Cristina, maybe just more generally on Westworld, obviously with theme parks being my thing, as you also nicely pointed out. It was just more of a general thing. I don't know how familiar you are with Jurassic Park, but obviously, I mean, I guess we all kind of know Jurassic Park, but so it feels like that, I mean, obviously the same author in this case, but that idea of the theme park, of this completely dystopian space that you also kind of got to at the end. I was just wondering if you want to talk about that a bit more. Because I mean, obviously it's a very like in your face critique of like consumer capitalism, but why do you think Michael Crichton keeps coming back to kind of this as the space, where everything goes horribly wrong, and it's a space of exploitation in certain ways. In Jurassic Park it's of nature, and in Westworld it's mostly bodies and women, but yeah.
Yes, well, in Westworld we can see that Michael Crichton, what is very upset about is, well, in the novel, no, I mean, it's different in Jurassic Park and Westworld, because in Jurassic Park is the genetic manipulation, and in Westworld is biotechnology, the latest advance in biotechnology. So both of them shows like a base, an ideological base of technophobia, of that very afraid of technology, that is a very typical topic developed in different cinematography in the 70s in science fiction genre. So I think that Westworld goes in that direction, not the same up as other films of that era. Why he chose the Western genre as the main landscape for the theme park, despite there are others, like in the future world we can see in the Romance, medieval age. But he was an admirer of the Western genre, so he wants like to contribute, no, to mix the science fiction and Western in one film, because he said that he hates science fiction. I found that quotation and I was very surprised. So, yes.
Thank you. So there are currently no more questions in the chat. Is there anything more on your end? Yes, Joseph.
Yeah, I just wanted to, Cristina, I guess one thing I wanted to think about with Westworld was, I'm only up to season 2. I haven't seen season 3 yet, to be honest with you. But I think from the point of view of the viewer and like what it's doing, so it's like, it's obviously like, I found it really interesting, like the references that you were making to like all the detritus and the rubbish and the waste. Like, what was that city? Was it Leonia, or was that the name?
Leonia, yes.
Leonia, yeah. That was really cool. And so I think there is a sense then that the Westworld, it's a an analogy, right? It's an analogy for the way that we treat the world, or that we, I mean, and like not just in terms of like waste or garbage or climate crisis, but I know like Westworld has also been, like the series was also criticized for the way that essentially you have an army of slaves, but that they don't talk about race, bizarrely, even though you have like, you know, you have people of color.
Yes. Well, one of the sorry.
No, go ahead.
Well, one of the ideas of Jonathan Nolan and Lisa Joy, that are the creators of this TV series, was to represent a Western landscape like the frontier, as a criticism of the wall, Trump's wall, and all that impact in currently United States regarding racism and xenophobia. Revival, or awakening again under the population.
That's interesting, because
we can see that in Maeve. Maeve Millay is one of the characters, and a native Indian that is sorry.
Yeah. No, I know the character you mean, because I think like, because there seems to be ways in which Westworld is like, it seems to be acting as like a really on the nose kind of like analogy for you know, for, you know, the West and like, you know, both in terms of like gender relationships, like potentially racial relationships, also like treating the planet. But like there's something about like an analogy that's different to a simulacrum, because a simulacrum suggests that you're like completely collapsing the difference between like an analogy or a metaphor and the thing and the figure and the thing itself, right? But Westworld also seems to want to be an analogy at the same time. Do you see what I mean? There's something, it's trying to do two things at once. It's like the world becomes a simulacrum, and you kind of refer to like Disneyland, and like there's that whole thing like Baudrillard talks about where like Disneyland is essentially is the real. It is like, and you know, there is no border between like Disney and the rest of America, basically. Like America is, and so there is that whole thing about like Westworld just being, and just like there is no real difference between Westworld and the rest of America potentially, or the rest of the West. But from the point of view of the viewer and the way that we're invited to engage with the show, we're also invited to think about it as an analogy for the way that we treat the world, that we put our good hat on or our bad hat on. So from a moral perspective, I feel like when I watch Westworld that I'm being like, there's a tension there, because I feel like I'm being invited to look at it in two ways.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And like, so I don't know. It's like, it is a simulacrum, but it's also trying to pretend that it's an analogy. But that's, maybe it's a really convoluted, unhelpful point, but I always thought that was something really odd about Westworld, like when I watch it on TV. But yeah, anyway.
Yes, that's a good point. And what I was thinking, about simulacrum, is regarding the visitor who arrives at Westworld, because they are selling that that representation of the Wild West is very loyal to historical representation. So to make visitors feel like they are living that passage of the history, but at the same time building this theme park using all the topics, typical themes of the Western genre, they are contributing to perpetuate the American mythos regarding that moment of American history.
All right. Thank you. And we're also kind of coming close to 8 p.m., at least in Germany. So if there's nothing else, I'd wrap this up here. And I want to thank you all again for your presentations. I do sincerely hope we get to meet in person at some point in our lives. But anyway, it was great having you here, and have a good night, everybody.
Thanks so much.
Bye.
Thanks so much, Sabrina. Love you.